Hey, so I am working on a platform. My last video was sort of the why I'm working on a software platform for myself, a software system for myself, um, because I have literally almost 70 web domains, .coms, .nets, .orgs, all these domains that I've bought. That when I look at the list, I look at and I'm like, I really wanted to do something with that. There's a site that I wanted to make. There's an app that I wanted to make. There's a service I wanted to offer. And one of the things that gets in the way is the friction of how much effort it takes to set up a new site, what it takes to, put a landing page and a newsletter on something. And what everyone's solution to that is spread across a whole bunch of different services. And I'm a software developer, I've written code for 40 years at this point. And so what I want is sort of a combined experience that most of the tools that do this have me bouncing back and forth between windows to do. And so while what I'm going to build is in fact going to include a bunch of online services, I'm going to be writing code over the top of that lets it all come together. And the overall goal is to make it so that I can go from idea to website, web application, web store as fast as possible with as many of these ideas as possible without racking up a whole bunch of extra fees for every new site that I add, which is another problem with most of these services. And so the services I'm going to use are sort of a level down from the Squarespaces and the Wix and WordPress and those kinds of things. I'm going down a notch in the stack for software. We talk about the stack of abstraction. And so I'm going down a notch, and then I'm going to build my own layer around it and gluing things together that makes it so that I can do effectively this sequence. I want to be able to ingest, pull from the world, pull from websites, newsletters, RSS feeds, podcasts, YouTube subscriptions, social media feeds. I want to pull all of that information in, and then I want tools that will filter what's all coming in to identify the stuff that I want to pay attention to in general, but also like what's suited to some of these individual sites, and then surface that in a way that I can quickly go through and read what is most useful or watch what's most useful, most relevant to what I'm trying to do, and then make it really easy for me to take that, process it in my own head with AI assistance, and write and produce videos and outputs from that. So it's sort of an ingest, digest, express is the sort of phrasing I've been coming up with in trying to describe this. Now, I have a little bit of time off here in December, or a little bit more free time available for me, given the way some work circumstances have turned out. And so what I'm doing is I'm prioritizing the express side of it. So making it so that it is really easy for me to set up to point a new domain at a pile of software and have it up and available, and I can put content out for it. And then I'm going to fill in other pieces around it, making it easy to publish to social media, making it easy to publish to places like YouTube, and then also working on the ingest side of things as well. But the express part, if I build all the tools to do the ingestion first, then you sort of have a pile of things that you still want to publish, and you have no way to publish them out. And that's already been sort of a problem for me. So I'm solving it from the other direction first. And I figured this morning I would take a look at what the pieces for that publishing, that expression side are going to be, for those who want to follow along, and where I'm at with my use of them at the moment, and how this sort of all hooks together. So let's take a look at that. So one of the sort of the base level of my stack is PostgreSQL, which is a database engine, for those of you who know, but I'm having it hosted at a place called Supabase, supabase.com. And they provide not just the database itself, but they've got some authorization stuff so that I can use Supabase's authentication for securing the things that are for my use of it. And then in a minute, we'll talk about the system that I'm setting on top of this that will allow me to provide user accounts for those of you who want to use the websites and apps and whatever that I put out, which is separate from being able to use the system that builds it, if that makes sense. But since this gets me, it handles backups automatically, it handles a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. It also can handle storage, although I'm actually not using their storage for files at the moment. But it does handle that stuff, and it does so at a really cost-effective kind of pricing. You can get going for free. Obviously, I won't have a ton of users. It's basically me until it goes a long way. They are limiting your database space, and your bandwidth is where the limit is. But you'll see that it goes from $5 to $250 when you drop $25. And I am, just so we're clear, you are going to see that this system is going to cost me several $100s a month to run. But trying to run 70 websites is, if you try to do something like that on Wix or Squarespace or whatever, you're going to be looking at this kind of number for every site. And the way that I'm doing it, I'm going to be paying some of these numbers sort of once for the whole platform. And therefore, the first couple of sites are going to cost more than what, if you only have one or two sites, this strategy is not going to make any sense. But if you're a person who's trying to build a lot of them, the cost savings add up as it builds, and that's why I'm strategizing and architecting it the way that I am. So anyway, I'm literally running this project on the free version at the moment because I have not crossed any of these thresholds for bandwidth or storage. So what that gives me is also a really nice user interface over the top of my database tables. There's a bunch of tables in here that have prefixes on them, and those are because of some of the products that I'm actually using. But it gives me really nice ability to see all of my websites as raw data. So this gives me one level of like direct database access to the information that's going on. And then on top of that, I'm using a product called Directus. And Directus is basically a flexible backend. It lets you turn a database into a headless CMS, admin panels, some custom UI. It provides an API, which is what an application programmer interface that is intended for the front end, the websites themselves, to be able to retrieve content and interact with this data. And that's where that whole system of permissions around public-facing users comes out of this product. And you'll see there's a whole bunch of people who use this. Lots of vetting has gone on. They've got some really nice authorization flows around who can see what, and that allows me to do things like blog posts. The only blog posts that are available via the public API are the ones that are published, right? So it's public content, therefore it can be seen by the public. But I also can restrict it to members-only content, and this provides the tools to make that kind of thing work. And if I'm in here, you can see I've got global is sort of the whole platform. This is the Aiden Content Republic, which is my joke about it not being an empire, because I don't believe in empire. But these are some of the projects that I've set up, some of the sites that I've set up. Sites have pages, sites have posts, sites have newsletters, sites have podcasts, although podcast might not belong on their site, it might be separate from a project, but there's a website all over any of those. YouTube channels, including the one that I'm on right now, right? So this is the YouTube channel. And then there are video episodes, and so there are intended to be videos made for what I've got coming up. I want to do a video essay on the electric typewriter project that I'm working on. And each of these kinds of forms is defined in this data model thing. So over here, I can edit what the forms are, but what I'm actually editing is the database structure underneath. And so if I come in here and say that a newsletter needs, and this is one I hadn't set up yet the rest of the way. So a newsletter right now, it has an identifier, it has a status, it has a date created and a date updated. It doesn't even have a title. And so I can come in here and I can say that I would like to add, the newsletter has a title, it's a string, it has no default value. I can say that that's required. I can put a placeholder, I can put an icon on it. And there also is an advanced field mode that lets me put a whole bunch of different kinds of fields on here. So a newsletter does in fact belong to a site, or at least to a project. And so I can come in here and pick a many to one and choose that it belongs to a site. And then it will let me choose which collection, which is the other name for the table. And I can come in here and choose site. And then whenever a site is going to appear in a newsletter, so in the drop down where you pick them, I can choose what field for a site I want to use. In this case, I want to choose its display name. And then I can hit save. And that will add that field to. Now, I want to pick a site before I pick a title, just in sort of the way I think about how I want to make a new newsletter. And so I can move that field around, and these are automatically saved, so you don't have to save, but watch that corner for when you do need to save in some cases. And then if I come back, newsletter sits in here. These can be moved around and organized, and then that reflects how they show up here. But now if I come out and I try to create a new newsletter, I will have a site chooser, or I can choose to do something about this platform. Localhost is literally my test site for running on my own computer while I'm building this. That lets me load things up and that they work. So I can call it test newsletter, and then you'll see that this grid of newsletters also lets me pick some things like what do I want the order to be, whether I want to align the data inside, if I want to hide the field or not. I can also add, in this case you'll see site is here as a related thing. I can choose to add the display name of the site instead of the site's identifier. And so what I can do is come in here and do that. I want to hide the identifier, and I want to move this over here, and then this dot is an indication of that it is a site display name and not the display name of the and I may want the status over there instead. I don't know, but you can move this stuff around, you can adjust how it works, you can choose the name of the site. I need to dig around and see if there's a way to change this so that instead of this dot indicator, it actually would just say display. I'm fairly sure there's a way to do it. I just haven't gotten far enough into all the details of it. But I can choose whatever columns I want to display here in my list, and this is the way that I can avoid having to build an entire administration application myself for managing all of this data. And so, like, I've also got an LLM prompt thing, which is going to let me build prompts. The point being that this lets me to have a real database. So if I ever decide I don't want to use Directus anymore, I still have a real database. And you'll see that the database collections, these are the names of all of those things in Directus. All these prefix tables that say Directus are tables that it is managing. But then every one of these is itself also a table. So there is actually a post table here, and that contains any posts that are in there. We were looking at a site. All those sites are in here with their names. That newsletter that we just put in here, I will need to refresh the table list. Let's refresh here. That newsletter table has a draft with test newsletter in it. So this data is portable in a way that I'm not tied to using Directus to do this. I just get to use Directus if I want quick and easy access to it. So Directus is giving me sort of my back-end administration and a place to write content and to write notes for ideas and to write scripts for YouTube episodes or for podcasts or for any of that kind of thing. And so those are sort of the two back-end pieces that set that all up. Now, at the moment, my ingest is less structured where it's actually like coming into one place. And what I'm doing is that on my computer here in my office, I'm running a bunch of Docker containers, and I can make some videos going forward if people are interested on like what the hell Docker is, how to use it to run these kinds of, because you can run Directus as a Docker instance on your own computer. Now, people won't be able to get to it, but you can run all these kinds of, you can literally run Supabase on your own computer via Docker to test things out and figure it out privately, in that people can't get to it unless you have all the networking set up for your internet connection. But what I am running are some tools that I use in my sort of day-to-day browsing of the web, day-to-day use of the internet, that are helping me do the ingest phase of this whole sequence with a little more control over it. So I'm going to show you those. So one of them is searching. And this is basically a semi-private Google, which is like, it's still reaching out to the internet. It's reaching out to a bunch of search engines. But if I search for Directus here, instead of using Google, where I get all their ads and all their other stuff, like as a web UI, I get my own search engine that's running on this computer. And so all those ad tracking things, all that kind of stuff isn't happening. And it lets me find what I'm looking for. It also does, searching of images, videos, news, map, all this kind of, it's a really nice search engine that is a meta search. It searches a bunch of other search engines, which you can actually configure in your preferences. There are a ton of them available. All of these are sources that it will use to dig, and you'll see by like there are a whole bunch of them out here. And there are, if you are a person who likes Boolean operators and being able to write a really careful search engine query from before Google ruined all that, this tool lets you get control over specifying exactly which, if you want PubMed, if you want medical papers specifically, you have a command to do that out of the gate. Wikimedia, data sets, there's a bunch of things in here around, specifically searching Docker Hub and the NPM packages, which I should turn on because I do use that. Obviously, the more of these things you turn on, the slower your results are going to be, but the more robust your results are going to be. You also can choose to, remove anything from trackers. So if you care about privacy and security, you're not genuinely anonymous in your search, but you pull back a lot of what people are getting from you if you use this. Now, one of the really cool things is that once this is running, and this is now my preferred search engine, which I then use to do my regular just searching, there's also a tool called Open WebUI, which is effectively like ChatGPT, Perplexity in particular, because it will use the search engines, and you can have it use this search engine on my laptop as the thing to search for internet information when you are asking a question. And I can choose any of a whole bunch of different models that are in here. Some of these, like GPT-4o, those are from OpenAI. That is literally GPT-4. And it uses my API key that I have, and so you pay per token to use that. But you can, in fact, use this to use GPT via the API. But because you're using it via the API, their terms of service indicate that your data is not being used for training the way it is when you use the OpenAI provided ChatGPT product that sits on top of GPT-4. But also, there's a bunch of them in here, like the Ollama ones, the Quen Coder, that are in Moondream, Mixtral. All of these are models that actually don't sit in the cloud. they run on this computer. And they run via a thing called Ollama, which lets you run any of, I think the number's actually close to 45,000 different models at the moment, maybe 50 at this point, that you can run. Now, this is one of the easier ways to do it. I won't say that it is like super easy. It really is relatively easy. But if you are not technical at all, the definition of easy varies quite a bit, obviously. But it lets me run those models. And that means that my AI isn't outside this house. It's behind the firewall. It's in this, literally in this office, running on that computer in the corner. And that means that I have a more private search engine and a more private AI that can do this work, where I'm not paying for the tokens. I'm just paying for the electricity that goes to this computer. And because of the battery backup that I have on this desktop computer, I know that even when running a relatively large artificial intelligence model on this computer, it only uses a couple of 100 watts of electricity at a time. When it's like doing its hardest work, it's a couple 100 watts, which is a narrative that runs counter to a lot of the discussion right now about the ongoing like environmental cost of using AI, because that's also about the exact same amount of power it uses if I decide to play a video game on this computer. So anyway, Ollama runs. You don't have to use it with a UI like this one. You can just use it directly. Like if I were to, I'm going to pull over a terminal here a second. I just want to make sure it's clear. So if I pull over a terminal and I run Ollama, run Llama 3.2, I think that's the actual model name, you'll see that it now is asking me to send a message. And this is this is like raw Ollama directly, but Ollama provides an API that other code can manipulate, like calling OpenAI's models do. And so I can use this in the terminal, but I also can use it from code. So code can ask AI to do something. And you'll see Llama 3.2, which is a fairly small model, ran fairly quickly. And then if I say goodbye, I can say Ollama run Llama 3.1 70, I think it's a colon, the 70B model. This one's going to take a little bit longer to load because it's a bigger model, but it still loads fairly quickly. And it runs a little slower. But if what you're trying to do is queue up, let's just say, dig through all of today's YouTube videos that came in and look at the transcripts and find the interesting ones for me to watch that are most likely relevant to the 70 sites I'm trying to publish. If you were to try to do that on OpenAI, you're going to burn through tokens and run up a bill. This way, it just runs in the background and does its thing. That's not a great joke. It's also kind of weird. But anyway, that's what Ollama looks like when it runs. And, they've got a list of models that are all like easily downloadable just by name. But there's also anything that runs in the GGUF format from Hugging Face can be downloaded and used. And you also can customize these models with your own sort of wrapper prompt, tunings, all that stuff is possible with these models. And then those models can be put into this UI. And this UI lets you do things like, I would like you to web search and it will now do a search. And I will say that like some of this is a little like the prompt that they're using on top of the model is something I want to figure out how to tweak a little bit better. But it will run that model. It pulled up 5 Google results. It's now going to run the actual prompt, and you'll see that it gives me an answer, and it gives me the 3 sites it referenced to do it. Now, whether this answer is good or not, whether this model is the right one, all those kinds of things are certainly worth digging into and tuning. And there is a ton of tuning that you can do in here. There are all kinds of like models you can pull in. There's even things like somebody wrote a D&D Dungeon Master Assistant that I was messing with. There are functions you can pull in, like add to memories. The settings are wild for the number of things you can connect up. You can have it do audio reading out things that you want it to say for the answers. You can make that all automatic. There's a ton of customization that can happen in here, and then also the you can record voice to say things. There's some extra pieces here and there that make it cool, but if you go to Open Web, and this time I just used Google because it was easy to show you how you're going to find it. But if you go out here, you will find tools that are, if their site's going to load. I'm just going to go this way and see if it makes a difference, because that website is not loading very quickly. It's on GitHub. It installs and runs via Docker. There's a quick start with Docker on it, on how to do it. I actually do a Docker compose instead of these commands so that I can easily keep the configuration managed without having to like store those commands. But it's out here. It's an interesting thing. There are some people using it. I mean, 50,000 people start it, but it's not super. It's not like millions of people using this thing yet. Anyway, their site must be down. But out there are prompts and wrappers around models, like the D&D thing that you can pull in and use. And like, there's even at one point I had there's like even a tarot reading it can give you. There's a bunch of that kind of stuff that whatever you're interested in. I will say that a lot of this stuff tends to skew a little bit. If you are a progressive person, some of what you will see is a little misogynistic, because a lot of the people who are doing this are very, very techie, incel-y kind of, unfortunately. It is what it is. But the technology itself is very useful. Nice, clean interface, doesn't drag all that stuff along for the ride. And those tools can be installed and augment how you use Open WebUI. So then, so we've got Postgres on Supabase. We've got Aident as our backend admin. We've got searching to be able to be my ingestion search engine. We've got Open WebUI to be my local AI with my local search engine to be able to do sort of unlimited AI work without having to spend more money than just basic electricity to the computer. We're using Ollama as our models underneath. And then I'm going to use a product called N8N, which is .io. And this is a self-hosted, again, it's running on Docker. Now I'm running, most of these things that'll be public will be running on DigitalOcean as the actual like hosting provider that I'm deploying this stuff to. But anything that you don't get to use directly, I'm running locally on my computer via Docker. But because both ends of it are run via Docker, it's fairly easy to bounce back and forth and have it all be consistent. And N8N is a thing that they do, in fact, have hosting, and you can have them do it if you want, but you also can host it on DigitalOcean, and you can host a copy on your local Docker. And I actually am going to be running 2 instances of N8N. One is going to be out in the public because N8N can work like Make.com or Zapier or those kinds of tools. where you can build these flows at a public URL, even though it's going to be secured, but a public URL that something on the outside can in fact trigger one of these flows to happen. But there are also some flows that, like, I want to be able to use Ollama AI to run, and my Ollama instance is not available to the public, and it shouldn't be available to the public. So I'm actually going to be running sort of, if there are flows that need to happen inside my firewall, those will happen on my local N8N, and some will be running out on the hosted one out on the internet. So the flows that I've got, you can do things like call basic APIs. This is a flow that that just does an HTTP request. In this case, it uses the Google Books API to, this was me testing whether I could look up a book by name and get its ISBN and get its information, the correct title, the editions of it, which will let me, for the books that I read, be able to put up an affiliate link to Barnes & Noble or Kobo or Amazon, wherever those things are going to be, and do book reviews and all that kind of stuff easily with a flow where I can just say, I'm writing about this book, and this will pull in all that information about the book. And I've also got a flow that then this helps by putting together a rough draft of notes for a book review of a book that I've read that I can then augment with my own opinion. But also it's really useful to find out whether or not a book is worth reading. And so in this case, the only way this one triggers is me running the test workflow button. And what you can set up in here is to set up your mock data. But what I did, where you can, and this does require, like, this tool is often sold as a no code, but you can see that there's visible code. This is a JSON object that you put in here. But you do need to learn a little bit of coding. Interestingly enough, having now put this tool in place on some paid projects, I have learned how to help other people learn how to use this. And I now believe that N8N is one of the best tools out there to learn how to dip your toe into writing code. Because there are little pieces where you learn enough about code that you get to figure out how things work, but you get to do so in a little bit more of a drag and drop kind of an environment, and get access to the next layer down, and that helps your journey in becoming somebody who actually does code. So at the moment, the test case I was using is a book that I don't particularly care for, which is Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek, mostly because if your work is genuinely outsourceable to somebody else as easily as he describes, then it isn't super hard work to do in the first place. I've never been able to outsource the work that I do because the work that I'm getting paid to do is hard enough. That's why I'm being paid to do it anyway. But that's what I put in the information here. But it basically sets up that, you do a get against the Google API's book API with your API key and the title of the book. And then this maps out that I would like the book's title, its subtitle, its authors, its ISBN 13, which is the one that you can use to look up a book on Amazon. And so then that ISBN 13 is used in order to build an Amazon URL for it. And so if I run this, what I will get is out of the output of this, so each one of these chains together, and then the output comes up. So I run test, it'll run that request, and then if I click this, I can see what the output was, and this is the 4-Hour Workweek. Here's the subtitle, here's the authors, here's the ISBN, and then here's the Amazon URL to it. And that works as an Amazon URL and brings the book up. So then this means that I have an easy way, given a book title, to look up all, and you can see this is all the information that Google returned about the book, which is quite a bit, actually. All the different editions of it, all that kind of stuff is out there. And then I can take this to another flow, which is a nonfiction book report. And like I say, I'm now using it fairly aggressively. When I hear about a book to see whether I want to read it or not, this is helping me do that. And this is where you can build these kinds of flows that are using AI models. So in this case, this is literally 5 separate AI calls. I'm using Anthropic's Claude for all 5 of these, but they chain together one right after the other and result in an email being sent to me about the book. And so in this case, I can come in here and set, again, I was using the 4-hour work week as an example. And if I run this one takes a bit. So if I kick it off, you can then see it's now using this. It's running that Claude call. It's running the next one. And that this is also why I have send email as the final result, because what that email is going to look like can then happen in the background. So you can, again, to think in terms of my overall system, if I'm talking about being able to watch for a bunch of podcasts and YouTube subscriptions, whatever, I can watch for people to mention books that are recommended, extract the names of those books, run them through this, and then have another thing that looks at the various book reports. Right now it just sends an email, but if I store them all, I can have something that looks at all those stored book reports and identify the next book that I should read, if that makes sense. So you'll see that the output of each of these is passed on, and various prompts. So this one asks for, what are the key takeaways of the book? What are the primary criticisms of this book at large? If I were to take the good and leave the bad from this book, what would that look like? What are the competitor books for it? And then this builds a report out of all that. And so in this case, it's, can you turn all of these notes into a concise book report on, and then it puts the book name, intended to help people to decide whether or not to buy the book. And you've got over here the history of all of the previous outputs. So these are the key takeaways, these are the primary criticisms, these are the take the good, leave the bad, and these are the competitor, and then it outputs this concise book report. And you can see, like, these are new lines, so it actually does format correctly in the email. I'm not opening my email on a video to show you, but you'll see that some strategies may be unrealistic or inapplicable to many reasons, which is like one of my. There's certain attacks related to ethical concerns regarding outsourcing, unrealistic expectations, but also offers innovative ideas for increasing. So this is a fairly balanced and good way to get an idea of whether you really want to put the effort into reading this book or not. And it is the result of 5 AI prompts that run. I have yet to test this. This is running in my hosted instance, so it can't access Ollama models. But I am going to clone this and see how well it works against the free models that I can run on my laptop, on my computer, desktop. It also would run on my laptop to be able to do the same thing. So that sort of forms the system tools that are going to give me sort of my minimum viable version of this, which is I've got tools for searching and digging things, pulling them in. I've got tools for building up chains of assistance that will help me do what I'm trying to do. And then I'm going to build an API of code that I'm going to write around tying some of this stuff together, which is going to be done with the NestJS framework, which is a Node.js framework. And then I'm going to be putting a front end on top of it using Nuxt. And I understand everybody has an opinion about which of these frameworks you should use. At this point, I know a ton of these frameworks, and these are the ones that match the way my brain works and that I know well enough to be productive in. And the best framework is the one that you can be productive in. When people start having debates about which of these frameworks are better, it's usually actually about familiarity more than it is about how they function. And the differences between how they function is less of a difference than whether you know it or not. If you have to learn a whole new framework in order to do something, that's a big burden on the project that if you can just use the ones you already know well, you will be able to move faster. So this is the front end framework that I'm running. And then I'm effectively going to use a theme that is like, this is from Tailwind UI, and I did buy this a while back. Unfortunately, it is React and Next, which is not the framework that I know as well, and React just does not work the way my brain does. Vue lines up a whole lot better. But this theme is what I'm sort of going to use as my default theme for all these sites, which is fairly clean, fairly not tied to any one kind of site type, and lets me do a fairly decent blog kind of layout with a really clean look. And so this is what the sort of the look and feel of all these sites will be until I get to a point where I can override that for individual custom sites. And that sort of forms the end to end. Now there are pieces for how I'm going to manage newsletters and all that kind of stuff, but this is getting to what I said at the very beginning of this. The initial minimum viable version going out is about being able to publish articles and pages, landing pages very quickly. And these are all those pieces put together. And so I'm literally starting on this front end first. The front end using Nuxt talks to the API over top of the sites, the pages. So a site has in it, a display name and domain, and I'm about to add all the things around, like what should the highlight color be, what should the front page look like will be in the pages. So I'm working on the home page for it, and you'll see whether or not this page is in the menu or not. What the menu sort order of the pages is, if it is in the menu. I've got a place for notes, and then I've got a place for the content itself. This is going to be this is Markdown, but this is going to be more of a HTML dump. It goes in there kind of a thing. And so that's going to give me my ability to publish and get me the foothold for this system bootstrapping into existence and building out. So I hope that was a useful overview for anybody who's wanting to follow along for what all the pieces are, at least for this initial version of it. There are other tools and other pieces of the system that I'm going to pull in that are relevant, that are going to come over time. And one of the important things that I've learned over the years is to focus on prioritization and get the high priority stuff going first. And that means a place to write articles and a place to publish. And Directus is already giving me the scratch pad for, I can start writing articles and writing scripts and whatever while I'm building this front end out to be able to see the sites visible on the internet. And as soon as those two things can connect and I can deploy them, then I've got a pipeline for being able to publish. And then the rest of this can be augmented a little bit at a time and built up into the system that I've always wanted. And then it can eventually also include e-commerce. It can include all kinds of great stuff, membership sites or discussions. All of that's possible because the stack is going to give me a lot of the pieces I need without me having to build them. And then the stuff that I care about and want control over, I still get to keep control over. So there's probably going to be more videos on this channel about the high level version of it. Some of the deeper dives I'm probably going to spin out. Like if we go into the deep, how does Docker work? How does DNS and web domains work? How do one of the brands that I have a domain for is How's It Work? How's It .work is it one of the domains that I own, and I'm going to set up a YouTube channel for it. And so the deeper dive videos on tech are probably going to spin into that. And some of the things that are a deeper dive into AI are probably going to spin into a thing of their own. But I'm going to let this happen as organically as I can, because I found that when I try to pre-plan what all those categorizations are and set up all the individual pieces for all of them, it breaks down more than if I put that stuff on this channel until, there's a bunch of this stuff that probably belongs over there, then I can move it. Or I can just make everything going forward move over there and split things off. So that's what's going on. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see what I can do with all of these sites that I've got that I want to build out. It's a bunch of content I want to produce. There's a bunch of things I want to teach and share. And some of this channel and this video is about sort of teaching the what I'm doing level of teaching, but doing so by saying, like, I'm not here to teach you how to use Directus. but I'm going to show you what I'm doing, and you'll probably learn something about Directus in the process. You're going to learn something about some of these pieces while I'm doing it, but that's not because I'm building a course in how to do it. It's just that I'm bringing you along as I do it. It's just a little bit more of an apprenticeship kind of an approach to teaching it than it is about a classroom kind of teaching it, although I may do some classroom style content as well. So stick around if you like and follow along. Obviously, if you have any questions or there are things you want me to dive deeper into about any of this, holler in the comments and I will put notes in here about whether or not I want to make an episode about it. So we'll see. Anyway, hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you next time.